What are the stories of impact and ingenuity that are transforming our cities? Join us on the Urban Q, where we talk about tackling urban conundrums and celebrate stories, ideas, and people that help us create better cities for all. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Urban Q. Today I have with me Dr. Poornima Dore. Poornima is an economist working at the intersection of finance, innovation, and digital transformation. She is CEO of Dorian Scale, advising leaders on future readiness and purpose driven impact. A former director at Tata Trusts and part of the Tata Group for over 2 decades, she also teaches at management institutes across India, including at XLRI. Her research spans regional growth, tech for good, and smart cities. She was course director for Delta ACE, India's first certificate program on data decision making in municipal bodies. A board member and policy advisor, she's among South Asia's top 100 analytics leaders. Her 2022 book, Regional Economic Diversity, earned critical acclaim. A life member of the Institute of Directors, she's also a Carnatic rock drummer with the band Bodhi Tree. Welcome, Poornima, and thank you for joining us on our podcast, The Urban Q.
Thank you, Jaya. Happy to be part of an interesting conversation on a subject of, I think, global interest.
Great. So I'll start, Poornima, with the question that I ask all our guests to start with. And you've spoken about our inherent thirst for new vistas and venturing beyond our familiar surroundings. I know you ventured out quite a bit in the last couple of years, especially. So, which city, according to you, do you find interesting and why?
All right. So, one of the cities I covered as part of work related travel is a place in interior Rajasthan called Nagaur. So, Nagaur is fairly close to Ajmer and Jaipur for people who are familiar with that part of India. And I met folks there. So, Nagaur's interesting history. Why is Nagaur interesting? Because it used to be in the medieval period at the intersection of a lot of trade routes between Gujarat and other parts of Western Asia crossing the Indus. And in those days, Nagaur had a lot of eminence in the in both economic terms as well as a fort from military purposes. Now, in recent times, Nagaur has lost that space of being nodal. Most Indians also would not be so familiar with Nagaur. So when I visited there, the term Nagaur, it comes from the Gaur dynasty, which used to rule Nagaur, and people there felt Nagaur pe koi dhyan nahi deta, which translated in from Hindi means that nobody's paying attention to us anymore. The word Nagaur is a split of Na and Gaur. And I thought that it also describes a lot of the states of cities, not only in India, but many places which need attention and where a revival of sorts is perhaps long due.
Oh, that's fascinating. I actually did not know about Nagaur, and this was a very interesting tidbit. I know there are cities across India who share such stories, and also those that feel neglected. We'll talk about that a bit later. But coming to your book, Purnima, your work highlights that there are different pathways for India to sort of realize its economic ambitions. A lot of the context now with respect to policy and programs is shifting from sort of managing urbanization to kind of looking at cities as engines of economic growth. What would you say are the top factors that hinder Indian cities in reaching their economic potential? Nagaur is one small city isolated, but that's happening across cities, as you mentioned. And what are some things that are working in our favor?
I think decision making in cities is fairly fragmented, right? There is some part of what happens in a city which is decided at the center. There is some part which is decided at state. And then what is left is in the hands of the city municipal commissioner or the decision making authorities there. So this fragmentation means that at any point, no one part of the wheel has full control of the direction it will take. And therefore, alignment across these is extremely important and also sometimes challenging to engineer. If one looked at global parallels, a city mayor has far more authority, jurisdiction, delegation of power to be able to both access funds as well as take decisions on various matters of policy. So that is one aspect, which is a structural aspect. The second thing which I think comes in the ways of cities today is a focus on what is my strength. So today, a lot of cities are the economic part of what drives a city is not central to what cities talk about, or what even the public policy discourse is about. City planning or delivery of services, which is very important, but at the same time the economic strength of a city is going to be a part of what pulls funds, what pulls companies, what brings together people and industry into a city. So I think a lot more of that discourse into the decision making of how cities grow, and therefore which activity needs to be of primacy in which city. How do you create conditions favorable to it? The third thing I think is that uh, capabilities along data and people capabilities. So uh, the ability of a city to be able to deliver, I think, is contingent on the strength of the people, both within the municipal ecosystem. And while we have very, very good people on the ground, the ability of them to be able to deliver will need constant capacity building. We've seen some cities actually be very innovative in how they have partnered with the private sector, or even built capacities of their own team members to be able to address the new age challenges that cities throw at them. And this includes the ability to work with data, to work with technology.
So, Purnima, let me take the data thread on this, right? And even in your book, you discuss the need for more nuanced data driven approaches to growth. You were also on the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs working group for designing the data maturity assessment framework. So, based on that experience and what you've seen, what kind of data is most urgently required in cities, and especially in tier 2 and tier 3 cities, if we can just shine a light on that to help shape sustainable and inclusive economic strategies?
Yeah. Uh, I think we need data which is not very sophisticated. We need information which is just nuts and bolts information, which is about current population trajectories, uh, delivery of goods and services in certain geographies, using GIS better to be able to have targeted interventions. So I would start with transaction data. We place a lot of, I think, importance on survey data, which is great, but that has a certain periodicity to it, and it takes effort to collect. Today there's a lot of transaction data which comes in naturally. For example, GST data that's naturally getting collected, and it is telling you something about the economic profile of a place. Nightlights data, I think a lot of people have already started using that to tell us, which are the hotspots, which are not. But geospatial information, in the last couple of years, a lot more geospatial information has been opened up and has been made available. The second part is being able to pinpoint what are the gaps in a particular location. So being able to crowdsource what people want. So citizen service delivery applications. So some of these tools which are already there, to be able to make them accessible to more cities so that they're able to capture immediate transaction data better. Public officials can use that information to therefore then even prioritize their work. And the area where I think this will also have a game changing impact is being able to look at even accountability of public services and public officials going forward.
So, just a question on that, and that's very interesting. You're talking about the importance of geospatial, transactional data, and all of that. But I'm also wondering that, do you find that a lot of these cities actually don't have the capacities to kind of capture and utilize the data? Sometimes even when a lot of cities are capturing the data, there isn't a use case. So there's definitely a capacity gap in cities, don't you think?
Municipal capacities for data, not just data. I think capacities is a large question which straddles planning, which straddles even prioritization of how regions need to think. So, what data is important? How will I process it? How do I even get in the right technical partners to help me process this information? What does my RFP need to say? And how will I safeguard? Today, even data privacy and safeguarding data is extremely important. So, capacities to be able to both identify, process, and even partner well are important capacities which need to be there, both with the both with the urban system, government system. But I also think it needs to be there more with the private sector as well. I don't think that at the private sector, and also while people are very good at managing their data for their work, how that can join the dots for policymakers and how that can actually aid a lot in the big picture. Tools that have already been developed, there is a bit of capacity gap there as well, where good management making, I think, can help us a lot.
That's interesting. Now, also when we come to sort of regional balance, right, whether it's in terms of capacities or whatever, or economic development, even, you've highlighted the importance of regional balance, right? So you often end up in states where we have sort of mega cities and then everything else around it is really small or dependent on it. So how can we improve sort of current urban policy and planning practice to better integrate peri-urban areas where a lot of the new growth tends to happen, and rural areas into city economies? So just the realization that it's a continuum. These aren't sort of two very isolated, siloed, geographies, but they're kind of interdependent. How do you kind of improve the state of practice around that?
Where I think we need to do to look at the peri-urban narrative is that with census towns growing, with the with a lot of locations moving from being purely rural to urban, there are geographies which are at the periphery of cities, but also between the urban and the rural continuum, which where we need to have both the cities thinking a little more about how their peri-urban segments will grow better. So, for example, one of the things that we saw in our work with some of the city data officers also was coming up with use case plans of which are those geographies which are at the periphery of, say, a Gwalior or a Banaras, which are growing now, which have not been part of the boundary before, and which may lie outside the boundary. But are there plans where partnerships with the local panchayat there can help, both a better design, and in future, once some of those geographies get designated as urban, we are not waiting for them to become urban to plan for them, but having a hub and spoke kind of a sister engagement between the hub, which already knows how to handle some of its urban questions better, and the spokes which are now going to become urban very fast. India's growth story, while it is of course driven a lot by the mega cities that we have here, we did an assessment also of how much are the non-million plus cities contributing to this growth. And interestingly, we found that a significant amount of it is actually not connected with having a million plus city at all, which then means that, and we actually identified that how will you look at regional value added, how diverse is this geography. So until and unless the tier 2, tier 3 and the non-million plus cities are growing, this story is going to be limited, which makes a case for really and very seriously planning for those which are outside the boundaries of the larger cities that have held our public imagination for a long time.
No, and I really like your point about the partnerships with the panchayats, right? Typically, those are exploitative relationships for the most part. So, to talk about that, in your research, have you come across cities that have managed to drive more equitable and sustainable regional development? And can you walk us through a successful model?
So I think Indore could be an example where some of the planning of identifying public service delivery questions, which are central to the city, have found place in their plans. So the reason why, and I've been talking to a number of people from Indore in the recent past, that making cleanliness, which is this fuzzy thing, but making it central to what the city's identity is going to be, and therefore countering this assumption that a lot of the interior cities are not really fun to navigate. So Indore, as over time, it has a lot of rich history on the religious tourism side, etc., and that means it pulls in a lot of people who come, and especially in certain points of time. So managing that in prioritizing how Indore city planning will bring in safety, will bring in cleanliness, will bring in hygiene. And as a result, I think that has helped some of the businesses also attract more people. When cities are able to create a value proposition for themselves in this manner and can attract business, both firms and people have to come in. And in Red, we talk about that quite a bit. When firms and people both come to places, that is when the engines of growth story gets unlocked.
Right. Now, you mentioned about climate change and how that's one of the factors. And in fact, we are living in a climate emergency right now, right? And so often, ecological imperatives are seen as being at loggerheads with economic ones. And then there are these models that talk about regenerative economies and donut economic models. Do you think those are viable in the Indian context? I'm just curious about this. Yeah.
So I think they're interesting to study and analyze from a point of view of looking at how people have done it, what are the factors that have worked for them and what haven't. But I also think that in the Indian context, a lot is about what is going to get customized here. So if one looks at, and I think I will talk about this with data, that when one has seen how has a Japan grown or how has Germany, things which have worked for them have been specialization. The data is telling us that in India, it is diversification that seems to be driving our economy.
Hmm.
So at a regional level, at sub-state level, if the economy has at least 3 or 4 sectors which are working for it, those are the geographies where we are seeing good performance even on other development indicators, which is beyond the GDP part, on whether we are talking about workforce participation rate or higher levels of skill, as well as HDI related indicators. I am, of course, a believer that it's one thing to prescribe. The other thing is to create enabling conditions so that the right industries actually kind of emerge from there. And historically, if you look at it, where that has been possible, take a Bangalore as a ready example. Bangalore has grown not on the back of one industry.
Hmm.
It may have started with IT, but today, if you look at Bangalore, there is a lot of manufacturing happening in the periphery of Bangalore. You have Pinia Industrial Estate. You have many others which are, ancillary units around. The third industrial sector in Bangalore is education, where you have some of the best engineering colleges, several institutions of higher learning. We have an IIM there, and increasingly some of the international schools also. So over time, specialization, and what we also find is there's a cap to it. So there's an inverted U that gets created, and so specialized diversification is the sweet spot. So for an economy to actually be regenerative or to think of that, it is going to, there is an inverted U, which our data also shows. So how do you look at, say, 3 or 4 sectors that also help you talk to the environment better and plan for some of this, is where I would say that it has to be ingrown.
Yeah, super. So, also the point that you're making, right? And your work also really talks about there isn't one but many Indias. And you have an interest, and we are talking about small, medium cities here. And if you were tasked, for example, with advising a small or medium city which is on the cusp of growth, what would you say are the top three priorities that the city should focus on? And how would it differ from a plan, for a metro city like Mumbai or Bengaluru?
So I would start with understanding the both the economic and the resource endowment landscape. We talk about inherent strengths of individuals, and we should double down on them. I would say we have to transfer this thinking even at the city level. What are the inherent strengths here which we can build on? Identifying that and mapping that to the specialized diversification kind of continuum, which 2, 3, or 4 may be the core. uh, Second is looking at the resource endowment. What is the current resource endowment in terms of people, in terms of capabilities? And can some of that be, which is already existing, be harnessed towards this? And do we need to create some enabling policy conditions to unlock the bottlenecks? So looking at current resources, what are the bottlenecks to their them really getting their capacity? Does something need to come from outside? For example, if we are talking about some of the cities in Leh Ladakh, population density is a reality there, which is lesser than in most other places. So it would need to attract more people to come in to be able to do economic activity. So tourism is one method. There are other ways in which it needs to do it. On the other hand, Eastern UP is already has very high population density. You don't want a model which is pulling more people there. You need something which is going to create opportunities for people who have the capacity there, but who are often wanting to move out. So how do you look at remittances better? How do you leverage that? And the third is what from a policy bottleneck point of view. Do we need to unlock something? Do we need to bring in something new? Where is capital constrained? Are there models by which we need to, bring in municipal bonds, green bonds in ways that can, unlock value for places?
So, what is the kind of new model of ownership that we need in cities to kind of make sure that these plans actually then translate into action on the ground?
That's a great point that you make on how in smaller places sometimes ownership is more. What is called Jan Bhagidari, or the involvement of people, is definitely important. But I would say that leaving it to that is sometimes, putting hope out there and hoping that the world will converge around that. I think it needs a lot of structured top-down planning also. For instance, what would be the incentives for a municipal commissioner in a place like this to bring in public voice? Are there budgets? So you put in a very good plan, but if there isn't a budget, then people lose faith in the planning process. So it may once or twice people may participate in it, but then you're not backing the plan with a budget. Also, if companies need to come in, what are the policy enablements that make it comfortable for them to be able to bring in their investment resources and the belief that yes, this will give me results? Because at the end of the day, public investment or private investment comes in with the expectation or the promise of results. So I would think that a model I think we should probably call it a PPPP model, which is, while it is public-private partnerships, the public has two elements to it. One is the public money and capital coming in. There's a public voice element also. And so, bringing these together so that we are able to solve for it better. I think structurally we need to also not just have this. So we have the local decision making unit, which is the district or municipality. We have the state. But between state and district also, there is a lot of distance. There are many districts or municipalities or cities that are similar to each other. I think there is a case for a regional interim layer where cross learning can happen. It need not be a separate administrative layer at all. I would absolutely not advocate for more complexity into this. But from a cross learning, from a decision making, as well as a design layer, there is a regional possibility. And I think the NSS gives a lovely frame of NSS regions also, where cities within that region or districts within a region can actually find a lot of common space to be able to plan together.
Fantastic. So, a PPPP model where citizens have not just capital but voice, and then this whole dimension of bringing it to the regional layer, and how do you kind of expand the sense of ownership of a place to think about not just the small neighborhood, the small city, town that you may be inhabiting, but in the regional context. So that's brilliant. Purnima, thank you so much for those thoughts. It was a super interesting conversation. And really good luck to you for all the wonderful work that you're doing and the focus on the tier two, tier three cities. God knows we need it so much here in India. So good luck with that, and hope to speak again soon.
Thank you so much, Jaya.